The following program is an Animal House radio production.
And I've sort of lightened up over the years, but I will tell you that there are certain dogs that are easier to feed human food than others. The large dogs, like your dog Romeo, you could probably give him a little piece of chicken and he's going to go along and eat his dry food afterwards, correct?
He orders his own food.
Okay.
He come home and he has the menu for La Fantina there, and he's like, Aaron, I want this. And I said, buddy, I can't afford it.
But along the short is they never usually give up their regular food, even though you're feeding them a few human scraps.
Yeah,
unfortunately, you get to the little guys, the little spoiled ones, you give them a little bit, they take a mile. And I find a lot of times these little dogs, if you give them a little piece of cheese or a little piece of chicken, which typically are the common people foods that people feed their pets, they will tend to ignore their dog food. And then, of course, being as spoiled as they are, people worry that they're not eating enough. And before you know it, I would probably say that maybe 5% of the dogs that come to my practice are now on people food only because they won't eat dog food, simply because the owners are worried that if they don't eat, they're going to get sick. But I guess we feel that feeding them boiled chicken and boiled rice is good enough, which oftentimes is not because there's no vitamins and minerals.
You think?
Yeah. So anyway, I caution all of you little dog owners that you, if you're going to feed table scraps, it's got to be little. If none at all, it would be better. But if you're going to, just little bits. And some of the table scraps that I think are appropriate would be boiled meats like boiled chicken or boiled rice. Well, not rice isn't a meat, but boiled rice or boiled potatoes are also okay. And carrots are fine. Green vegetables are absolute no-no because they tend not to digest them. Milk is an absolute no-no for dogs because they're lactose intolerant, so cheese is, being a milk product, I wouldn't suggest. And if you can avoid it altogether, I think it's a great idea. But if you want to give your dog a little snack, as long as they're eating their dry food, their proper food, their dog food, then you can give them a little carrot here and there, a little piece of meat, as long as it's boiled, not fried, or baked or anything of that nature.
Now, Romeo likes to eat apples. So what I do is I eat the whole apple, and then I give him the core in the middle.
You know, apples are not horrible. They're quite acidic for dogs, but a little bit of an apple isn't going to hurt any dog. So, but remember, grapes are a no-no, and raisins, right?
Yeah.
Those are the fruits you don't want to
And
feed.
I didn't know about mushrooms either.
Yeah, mushrooms definitely a no-no as well.
Really?
Yep.
See, Adriana, no more mushrooms. Okay? No more feeding your dog mushrooms.
There you go.
Darn Adriana, she keeps feeding her dog mushrooms. I'm telling you, she's got some serious issues. But if I had to ask you, what was the worst thing? Someone has came in, obviously to your clinic and said, we've been feeding our dog this. Like, have you ever heard someone come in there like, well, when you say, well, what do you feed your dog? And they're like, well, we give him pizza once a week or, twice a week, large pepperoni pizza. No, seriously.
I've got something better. We have a golden retriever in our clinic, and his favorite snack of all snacks are Listerine breath mints.
What?
The dog goes crazy for the breath strips. And
the little
strips.
Oh,
he
wow.
loves them. He will actually do any trick in the book for Listerine breast strips. I offer him a piece of freeze-dried liver. He doesn't want that. He wants his Listerine. So she brings them in, and I feed the dog, and we give it to him while he's getting vaccinated. Just loves it. It's unbelievable. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen anyone feed a dog.
Does it actually help with the breath?
It does, actually. Dog's got pretty decent breath.
We should give that to Riley.
Okay.
We should hang it up with Riley. I think that'd be great. Now, obviously, getting back into our actual theme of the show, what we're going to do, once again, every time we talk about a theme, we get a little bit pumped up. It's like we want to put the gloves on and fight. And, every single week our feature topic is something that is current, non-current, but something that's to do with animals, something to do with the industry. This week's feature topic, once again, is the better part and part two of what has transpired over the past 10 to 15 years. The good, not the bad, not the ugly, but the good in veterinary medicine.
Wonderful.
Me like medicine.
Well, as I told you, there are many more goods than bads. Last week, one of the bads that we talked about that I kind of felt bad because I didn't get to sort of talk about it more was these new breeds. Remember we talked about the different breeds, specifically the poo breeds. Now, these are dogs that don't go to the washroom more often. These are just, everything is crossed with a poodle. Cockapoo, multi-poo, goldie poo. There's so many of them, it's not funny.
Why would they name it poo at the end?
No, because
do they have a Winnie Pooh?
Yeah.
Can you mix a bear and a dog and then have the Winnie Pooh? No, seriously.
I have no idea. I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, onto these breeds. The one thing I do like about these breeds, and they're also a new breed that we're not seeing, there are a lot of problems with purebred dogs today. And so I think mixing breeds is also a good idea. And in this situation, it is. The nice thing about mixing poodles in why it's a common cross is because poodles are, of course, hypoallergenic and they don't shed. So a lot of people are crossing dogs with poodles for that reason alone. And I think that's great. The other thing that I think is great about genetic diversity is genetic diversity. If you cross two breeds, sometimes you're going to get the bad of both, but more often you're going to get the good qualities of both. So I think that's another great reason why we're having these mixed breed dogs come to.
What's the worst mixed breed dog? Health-wise, for people who are listening right now and saying, I want to get one of these dogs, these sheep poo, these, wood poo dogs, whatever it is, computer poo, Intel poo, Mac poo, whatever it is, whatever the poo dog is, what is the worst health-wise that can come up with?
Well, you know what? It tends to, I would pick a dog that ends up having most health problems to start with. For instance, and nothing against bulldog owners, I love bulldogs, but they have a lot of problems, and as most bulldog owners know. So there have been bulldogs crossed with other breeds, and those guys are probably having just as many problems as bulldogs because they are brachycephalic, which means they have sort of a squishy nose, squishy face, so they have all the respiratory difficulties that a bulldog, a purebred bulldog, would have. So let's go on to talk about some of the other fascinating new things.
Please tell me.
Diagnostic testing, the way we diagnose disease, that has come hundreds of miles from where I was 15, 20 years ago. One of the cool things for us is they have these really cool, what they call snap tests. They're sort of tests that you can do within 5 minutes where you can find out whether a cat has, for instance, feline leukemia or feline AIDS. We can test for a condition called pancreatitis, which we never used to be able to do before in dogs. So there are many diagnostic tests out there that we're doing today that really have come leaps and bounds from where we were. For instance, one of the ones that I'm familiar with is a test called fructosamine. In the old days, when diabetic cats would come in, we used to have to test their blood glucose every hour, and I found that really stressed them out and didn't like it very much. Now we can do one test that essentially measures their blood glucose for the last 2 weeks. So it's very accurate, and it's really great for not stressing out our kitties who have diabetes. And there's been this huge influx nowadays into DNA testing for dogs and cats, where we're testing for diseases that you can pick up through DNA testing. So,
what's the number one disease you can pick up through DNA testing, Dr. Mike?
The number one?
I mean,
there's so many.
No, but what's one that you can test on DNA that 90% or
well, we never used to be able to test for certain viruses.
Okay.
So lots of viral things that we can test for. For instance, a lot of the upper respiratory tract infections in cats. Upper respiratory infections like colds and the like that are viral related, you never used to be able to tell whether they had a herpes infection or a calicivirus or any of these upper respiratory tract infections. Well, you can run a DNA test now that tests them for those.
Wow.
So it can actually tell owners which virus their cat has. So I think that's fascinating.
And what about the equipment that you have to use that? This is stuff that obviously wasn't available, 20 years ago. And as someone I can imagine who went to school, 50 years ago? No, just kidding. Now, someone who went to school 10, 15 years ago, 21 years ago, or something like that yourself, you must have seen, it's like when I went to school, we didn't have computers.
Right.
We did. We had, and then in grade 6 they introduced them, right?
Right.
And I'm not that old. And then obviously now you work in an environment where everything is on a computer.
Right.
So kids are growing up now in classrooms where people are, they're learning everything on computer, as opposed to you and I, we didn't grow up in that atmosphere. So it's the same type of thing when you were educated, but the issue is you kept up with the times and the education and with the technology.
Right. So one of the things that we're using computers for instance, is monitoring anesthetics. Back in the old days, when I first graduated, we had this respiratory monitor. It was called an app alert, and essentially where the dog was breathing, it beeped. That's all it was. It wasn't computerized. It literally was just a beep. And so it was kind of sad that all we were doing was monitoring their respiratory rate, and that was a problem. Nowadays, it's amazing. At our clinic, we have these monitors that monitor 6 or 7 different parameters, like their oxygenation of their blood, EKG, core body temperature, respiratory rate, pulse rate, the whole 9 yards. It's like human medicine.
And this is standard.
This should be standard. It should be standard.
It should be standard.
It's standard in our practice. I think it should be standard in all practices because you've got these animals under anesthetics. They're people's loved ones, and you want to make sure that everything is monitored. I mean, your chances of success are pretty well 100% if you're just watching and taking care. I'm a big believer that any problems in human medicine and animal medicine that happened moons and moons ago were because we weren't able to monitor them properly. If an animal's heart rate, for instance, was going down, unless you were there listening to it all the time, if you didn't hear it, you could have missed the fact that it was dropping and dropping and dropping to the point where it dropped so low you couldn't do anything about it.
And I'm sure the technology is around right now where if you're at home with your family and you have something set up on a network or something in your clinic or in other clinics, and something is going on where you see, there's a machine that says, the heartbeat or the rate is dropping or going too high. You may get a little page or something and says, you need to get that back down.
We're going to get to that. I mean, it's coming because all these programs now, all these monitoring systems are are linked to computers.